Welcome to Successfully Ambiguous, the podcast that asks when opportunity knocks, will you be ready to answer? I'm Christine Brooks Cappadocia, and today we're going to meet Dana Stephenson. In addition to being the founder and CEO of Riipen, a company that matches employers with education institutions and students to solve some really big societal issues in terms of how do we get students to learn durable skills? How do we get that level of adaptability that we all need during AI? He's taking on some huge societal issues like access and equity, national productivity, and doing that by bringing people together. So let's open the door and meet Dana. Dana, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Christine. It's great to be here. Excited for the conversation.
Well, I've been dying to have you on the podcast because in many ways your journey looked like a lot very similar to what a lot of our students have. You talk about your path towards education not being quite linear out of high school, and we've taken it that step further by founding a company to address some of the concerns that you saw. Do you want to bring us through your origin story?
Sure. Well, I think you can definitely say, linear was not the path for me. I think, I was born and raised in Vancouver. In high school, I was very much into math and physics, and I think I was really drawn to perhaps a career in engineering. I decided to take a year off after high school to work to help earn some money and make sure I could pay my way through university without taking too much student debt, and do a little bit of discovery in that year before I actually enrolled. And I was actually working construction at the time, but also playing community football. And I broke my hand playing football. Wasn't allowed to play the last final playoff game. But what was interesting about that is that I was at that point I was really quite shy. I took a job while I was in high school in customer success. A version of that as a cashier. That was to break through my shyness. At least that's what I was told. It was huge for me.
Good way to do that.
Yeah, I mean, talking to people, listening, answering questions. I mean, it was just getting that work experience early on in high school was a big deal for me. But it was when I was actually had my broken hand, laying on the couch, sort of complaining to my mom I wasn't able to work construction, that she found an ad in a newspaper for a job in sales. Which was absolutely terrifying to me at the time, but she had convinced me to go take it. It was a telemarketing job where it was paid 1 week of paid training. And I thought, okay, you know what? 1 week of paid training, even if I hate it at the end of it, I can, go back to construction after. But what was so interesting is that I found that I learned more in this first week around, the human transferable durable skills, as many of folks call these skills today: empathy, communication, critical thinking, creativity. That I found that I could apply to my day-to-day life than what felt like I had learned, in the last 5 years of my high school education. I could actually apply these every single day, and that was transformational for me, and immediately, encouraged me to want to seek a career in business. I really enjoyed working with people, motivating teams, working and collaborating in teams, and these new skills that I had learned and started to apply and see the impact that those were having on me and those around me were super inspiring.
Everybody should at some point. I know we don't do a lot of telesales anymore in marketing, but there's a lost opportunity there. I used to sell advertisements in an opera magazine.
Oh,
And
wow.
there's something really powerful about, and again, was also painfully shy, something really powerful about getting to your third or fourth no where it just doesn't matter anymore.
Yes,
You can ask anybody anything.
yes, you want to talk about flexibility, dealing with ambiguity, resiliency. Again, these are skills that employers are looking for. Going out there and coming up with a hypothesis around how you're going to pitch something, putting it out there to market, being comfortable with failure, learning from that failure, absorbing that, iterating on that, and continuing to do that over and over again, it teaches you lessons in life, and skill sets that no matter what you're doing, they'll apply. So I think it's underestimated, undervalued. Not enough institutions are have programs in sales specifically. But many graduates, will I think quickly realize that there's a wealth of opportunity, should you have the opportunity to develop those skills.
Oh, absolutely. And you and I are both believers in work integrated learning. It's what brought us together many, many years ago. And I think you learn some of that messiness in a real project for an employer. You can write the nicest case study in the most complex case study in the world, or work on the most well thought out assignment, but it doesn't have the things that could go wrong that happen in real life with a work integrated learning project, right? Real projects are not linear. There's no answer in them.
That's right. I think, we obviously were, when we first came up with this idea of launching Riipen back in 2012 as students, we were already sort of stuck on this concept that the world is moving very quickly. We're not going to graduate and have one role like our parents did. We're going to have multiple roles. We're going to experiment with different things. The skills that are needed are going to change. How do you help education keep up with that? How do we help higher education institutions prepare students for futures that are uncertain? Now, in the last 2 to 3 years with AI, I think we've all had a huge wake-up call that future is, feels like it's now, and it's changing faster and faster, more rapidly. Relying on these fixed lists of skills or competencies just really isn't going to work anymore. We need to prepare students to learn and unlearn and relearn. We need to prepare them for ambiguity. We need to prepare them for for embracing change. As Riipen is an employer, it's hugely important to us. We have a huge theme at Riipen, which is all about embracing change. If we're doing the same thing 6 months from now, we're probably not changing fast enough. And so, really encouraging that growth mindset, that entrepreneurial mindset, where it's not failure if you've learned from it, and to be comfortable with that and having things change in the middle. I understand for our employees sometimes that's challenging. I just got the hand of this job, and now it's changing. But that's the real world as we're seeing it. Things are evolving quickly. So how do we bring that kind of experience into our education pathways for students early and often? I think you're right. Work integrated learning is one of the best ways to do it.
Oh, absolutely. And when we first started working together, we were trying to solve the problem of millennials changing jobs every 2 years and university certificates taking about 3 to 5 years to complete. And so we got that down to, 6 months.
Right.
Now people are changing jobs. Gen Z is changing jobs every 6 to 8 months, right? They've just basically gotten comfortable in the culture, and they're looking for their next thing. So how do we train people, both employers and workers, to make sure that we can navigate that level of change?
Exactly, that's right. And I think there's a lot of debate around this, but I'm reading some of the headlines these days, articles coming out that students, they see assignments often less of an opportunity, to develop their cognitive ability, and their learning skills, and more of just a hurdle that they have to overcome on their way to a degree pathway. And it's sort of the system that we've created. You can, as you pointed out, you can create the perfect assignment, you can create the perfect case study, but that sort of plays into this, gaming the system, and students are trying to find the most efficient way to go through those assignments. Of course, AI has now become one of the most efficient ways, which is flipping everything upside down. So, we feel like this is the moment where work integrated learning is having its moment now. The best part about work integrated learning is that, as you pointed out, things are going to change halfway through the project. You don't know exactly what you're going to get. The employer thinks they have a pretty good idea of the challenge they're trying to overcome or the opportunity. But it's up to the students to meet with them, to engage with them, to learn from them, to think critically about the problem, to think creatively, to come up with new ideas, to propose those. And guess what? Sometimes they might be accepted, sometimes it might be rejected. How do you take that? How do you iterate on it? How do you listen and absorb that feedback and respond to it? AI can be a super powerful tool in that experience. And we're seeing more and more of our educators embrace it, and students embrace it, and the deliverables that are coming out of that are night and day from what they were before. But it will never replace the human skills that are part of those engagements. Working with people one on one, listening, trusting your gut, empathizing with the partner. These are things that AI just, we believe it, right, that never will really have the opportunity to replace. So, how can we use AI as an amplifier of human skills, rather than a replacement? It's really
Very
the
responsible approach to AI. One of the things that I think is so exciting about the way Riipen works with educators, employers, and students is that you're trying to tackle some really big issues, right? Talent mismatches, the need to get a job, to get some experience, some to get a job, which that paradox that people end up in, economic and productivity resilience. There's so many things that are just addressed by us bringing the partners together to think
Mhm.
about the greater good, right? Both on an individual basis, but on a societal level.
That's right. I think, a rising tide raises all boats in this model. We spend a lot of time really trying to break down barriers for learners who wouldn't have otherwise had access. We also spend a lot of time trying to break down barriers for employers who otherwise wouldn't have access. So really small, medium size, and in particular micro businesses, nonprofits, startups, who wouldn't have otherwise had the ability to participate in programs like this. But if you have the technology that helps streamline it and, again, amplify the human skills and bring the humans behind it together to create these authentic experiences, it can have a huge impact. And we spend a lot of time thinking about how do we measure that impact? How do you measure it on the learner? So increasing their employability, increasing their development of these durable skills, creativity, teamwork, critical thinking, but also, how do you measure the impact on employers? How do you measure the impact on society as a whole? How do you measure the impact on the economy? As things continue shifting quicker and quicker, we're seeing more attention from governments being spent on, how are we going to ensure that individuals aren't left behind as more, as skills continue to transform, as employers and the roles that employers are hiring for continue to transform more rapidly than ever before. How do we ensure that people don't get stuck, that they have the ability to go back to reskill, upskill? There's more on ramps and off ramps, that these people have the opportunity to get the education and the work experience at the same time and get right back out there to the workforce, rapidly. Because when you're in school, taking a couple of semester, when you're graduating from high school, taking, like I did, you have the luxury of taking a year off, and then living on in your parents' basement, and then taking a couple of semesters off to do internships. But when you are, much later on in your life, and you've got, other life commitments and loved ones to take care of, you don't have the same luxury. So how do you get the education and the work experience at the same time, get right back out to the workforce?
Absolutely. It's one of the reasons at the school that we've embraced intracurricular will, so smaller micro projects, which we work with you on, because it gives students an ability, if you're changing careers, to make some contacts within that career, to actually be able to go into a job interview and say, not only do I understand the theory of this, but I applied it when we did X. One of the things I think is really exciting is that you not only have you addressed the barriers of time and an opportunity to do work integrated learning and get that experience, but some of the things that hold students back in terms of accessing internships and co-ops have
Yep.
been the ability to do an unpaid internship. And you've worked with both the Ontario government for the international students and domestic students, and the Canadian government to make sure that work integrated learning projects are actually accessible through stipends for the workers.
Mhm.
We can't encourage students enough to apply for those.
Yes, 100%. I think, the we really got into this space because we believe that experiential learning, work integrated learning should be offered to students early and often. You shouldn't be waiting until your third year to get into your first co-op, or struggling to get into your first co-op because you lack experience to get into your first co-op, and feeling like it's already too late. Or you shouldn't be waiting till the end of your fourth year to do your capstone project. You should be, if you should be building up. If you know you're going to be doing a fourth year, if you know your students are going to be doing a fourth year capstone, you should be building up that experience earlier on, having them have lower intensity experiences to build up to and scaffold to a higher intensity experience. And so building it into the curriculum, so partnering with academic institutions, partnering with faculty members to transform their courses into work-based learning courses, that's always been key to our work. If you can get it into the classroom, you can guarantee that every student, no matter what their background is, no matter what geographic location they're in, no matter what their resume says, no matter what connections their parents have, every single student in that class is going to have access. That's been super important to us. But as you can probably imagine, I think, as you know really well, Christine, that as soon as you start putting it in the classroom, folks are going to say, well, I want to do this outside of the classroom. I'm hungry. I want more. But they have other life commitments. They have other jobs they have to hold down, especially in the continuing education, lifelong learning space. And so, being able to break these down into shorter, more flexible, project-based experiences with a paid stipend at the end really encourages more learners to jump in and participate while they're still in school, while they're maybe holding down another job. And it opens up a whole other world while they're taking care of other loved ones in their lives. Now they have the opportunity to participate, and they can participate in a remote setting. So we can break down geographical barriers for those from rural areas as well. But it's also a huge opportunity to encourage more small businesses who, before this model came around, were asked to say, "Hey, can you offer an internship? Can you offer a co-op?" And they would go, "Yes, that sounds amazing, but I just don't know if I have the infrastructure. I don't know if I have, 40 hours a week for 16 weeks set up to be able to offer this." All of a sudden, when you can break it down into projects, they can start with a 60-hour project, and if they have more, they can add more to that. They can scaffold it. We can find something that meets their unique needs. They can do it outside of the classroom, or they can embed it directly into the curriculum, or they can do both, and then build up towards something like an internship or a co-op or more full-time employment.
And we hear from employers. We have one startup that works with us provides a number of projects for us where they're they might be a 3-person shop at most at this point, and they all have other day jobs, but they're using work integrated learning projects to add new skill sets and new projects into their work as they scale up. So it's adding the value of the instructor's knowledge along with the enthusiasm and the ideas of the students. We always ask for some practical advice, and I think I'm going to ask you two that have come out of the mailbag. The first one is, as a student that's participated in a work integrated learning project, how might I translate that when it comes time to a job interview or on my resume? How do I translate the value of that for an employer?
Yeah, so I think the first thing you want to do is look at the skills that were demonstrated as part of that project-based experience. So both the durable, transferable human skills, like we've been talking about a lot on this, and do not underestimate how powerful those are, how important those are to employers, but then also the technical skills as well. Think about those skills. How do you, pull those out? There are some tools online that if you actually take, describe the experience that you were having, can help you extract those skills, and simply ChatGPT can really help you with that as well. And then start to think through like the story. How would you articulate that to a potential employer? Really focus on the questions that they might be they might be asking you. Give me an example where you faced a challenge and you had to overcome that challenge. Well, you certainly probably did as part of this project-based experience. Think of an example of where you faced a decision, and you had to. One thing that we're hearing a lot these days is that you had to think through the optimal, fastest way that maybe ChatGPT or AI may have recommended, the optimal way, or the right way based on leveraging your human judgment, and your gut. Again, something that AI can amplify, but not replace. So think of these kinds of questions. Tools like AI can really support you with that. And then put it on your resume and put it on your LinkedIn. Do not underestimate that. And if you go to Riipen, we've got a whole bunch of resources to help show you how you can do that. But certainly make sure that you're listing that, and you're speaking about it in a proud way, because you should be proud of it. And ask your employer who you worked on that work integrated learning experience if they'll be willing to offer a reference, or make some recommendations on folks in this space who they can introduce you to.
So important to ask for those next steps. I'm going to ask you one last question, and that's, because you've spent so much time thinking about how the government and employers and the learner and the education institution fit together to solve some big systemic uh, challenges within our society. One of the things employers really struggle with is to embrace hiring on soft skills, right? On the durable skills. So what's your advice for employers who are trying to look beyond simply using years of experience on a resume as a proxy for knowing something and really looking at talent that knows how to learn when they're hiring?
Well, obviously I am bias, so I would recommend that these employers start to explore work integrated learning and being the employer working with students and using that as or students or entry level talent or career transitioners because obviously work integrated learning can be great ways to assess talent for any of these for roles for any of these. Groups that you might be tapping into. And I think that's the really important piece is that starts to show you very quickly that these are learners who you have an opportunity to assess in real time whether they are good communicators, whether they're critical thinkers, whether they are creative, whether they have empathy, they're listening to you and are understanding and are willing to take feedback well and respond to that feedback. Again, as we move into a world where AI is taking on many of the more manual activity, these kinds of skills where you're motivating teams, motivating the people who work around you, demonstrating leadership, moving into those leadership positions, motivating folks across the organization, building relationships outside of the organization with potential partners. These are things that can't be replicated by AI. And so I think, really, if you're not going to be embedding, working with partners like York University to embed project-based experiences into the curriculum, then start to explore how you could use this as an experiential learning recruitment tool, where learners or individuals are actually, presenting a case as part of the interview process, rather than just answering typical interview questions.
Love that. So you're learning how they think. Dana, it has been such a pleasure to have you on the podcast. I hope you'll come back on a future season.
Absolutely. Anytime. It's been an absolute pleasure. I think we've been working together for nearly a decade. So, always a pleasure, Christine. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of Successfully Ambiguous. Be sure to leave your comments below or find me on LinkedIn to ask your career questions. Like or subscribe so you never miss an episode. And join us for the next episode so that when opportunity knocks, you'll be ready to answer.